Hey everyone, this is Jay at Always Late the YouTube channel, and today we are diving into a brand new trailer we got from the movie Spider-Man Brand New Day. There were pictures and little snippets releasing yesterday, the 17th, but today, this morning, the 18th, the trailer dropped, and it looks fun. It looks like we got some awesome stuff to talk about. The movie's going to release July 31st this summer. The trailer that we got is about 2.5 minutes in length, and it's going to be fun. We're going to go through the trailer together. We're going to break it down. We're going to theorize and then share some thoughts and opinions with each other, being that we're all Spider-Man fans here, myself included. I'm a lifelong Spider-Man fan. I remember growing up in the theaters watching Tobey Maguire, later on reading all the comics I could about Spider-Man. So we're going to get into it. Starting with the synopsis. So if you look at the description of the official trailer released by Sony, we get a fun little synopsis here. And it goes as follows. 4 years have passed since the events of No Way Home, and Peter is now an adult living entirely alone, having voluntarily erased himself from the lives and memories of those he loves. Crime fighting in a New York that no longer knows his name, he's devoted himself entirely to protecting his city. A full-time Spider-Man. But as the demands on him intensify, the pressure sparks a surprising physical evolution that threatens his existence. Even as a strange new pattern of crimes gives rise to one of the most powerful threats he has ever faced. So, as the synopsis states, and the trailer shows, we're picking up where a lot of threads left off in No Way Home, especially with Peter's relationships. MJ and Ned continue their journey at MIT in the trailer. They're living together, and they're living their own lives while Peter watches from afar. He's kind of a watchful guardian in the situation. He's been forgotten due to the spell Doctor Strange places on the world at the end of No Way Home, so he's completely alone. If you're going through the trailer, it's clear that this haunts Peter. It's not as if he has just moved on and away from this cast of characters. They're not abandoning it. They are still trying to show that Peter wants to be part of MJ and Ned's lives. That is most clear as Peter recounts the opening of a letter he has written to MJ. The first half of the letter goes like this. Hi, my name is Peter Parker, and you don't remember me. But I have something to tell you that's going to sound crazy. But it's the truth. And I know you are going to believe me because you are very good at telling when I am lying. We used to know each other. We were together. But something bad was going to happen to the whole world, and the only way to stop it was to make everyone forget me, including you. But this is likely the same letter he has been hanging on to since the end of No Way Home. When he goes to confront MJ, he wants to read this letter to her, that way they can remember each other, but he ends up chickening out because he probably thinks that MJ is better off without him, more safe, and that Spider-Man is only ever going to put her in danger. You feel this sense of longing to reconnect as we see Peter bump into Ned at like a coffee shop or somewhere like that, or a little restaurant. He's also attending a party at the apartment that Ned and MJ likely share together. MJ is also seen with a possible new love interest here at this apartment, and many fans are speculating that it's probably going to be the infamous Paul. Paul sucks, that's all you gotta know. He's a current character in Spider-Man comics, and everybody reading it hates him. He's not fun. Of course, it could also be someone else random. It could just be a little fling, no big name character or anything like that. It just kind of comes and goes to add a little bit of tension and drama. Speaking of drama, I think a big thing that this trailer is trying to convey is that they're going back to some of the things we saw earlier in Spider-Man movies, which is, the drama of Peter's life, not just as Spider-Man, but as being Peter Parker, that drama with the love that they experience, the whole will they, won't they thing. And I think you also see that here. Is Peter going to reconnect with Ned and MJ or keep a distance? We see a shot of Spidey in front of MJ on a rooftop at night. So this could be because he does decide to reconnect with MJ, but it could also be that Spider-Man saves MJ from danger, and this sort of kindles a spark between her and Spider-Man, creating a whole new dynamic that is different from her and Peter. At the end of the trailer, you can tell that Peter's at least speaking to them somewhat. Like I said, he's at a party with them. Peter's talking to Ned at the end of that trailer. When MJ walks in and Peter gives her flowers as a housewarming gift, and ends with a fun little quip that, he's just a neighbor, a friendly neighbor.
Nice flowers.
Oh, they're a housewarming gift.
I'm MJ.
I'm just a neighbor from across the hall.
Friendly neighbor.
My theory here is that Ned will end up remembering Peter first. It's going to happen in this movie, I think. MJ may not remember Peter in this movie, but I think Ned will. Now, to kind of back that up, you may remember that not even Doctor Strange knows who Peter Parker is anymore, as the spell that he casts affects everyone. However, real people, everyone, is speculating that Hulk will remember Peter, as that is displayed in the comics. There's this little panel, a little exchange after, the deal with Mephisto, where everyone forgets Peter, that Hulk does in fact remember. He's not affected by the magic, and even though Bruce Banner has forgotten, Hulk remembers. But in the ending scene of the trailer, where Peter's alone with Ned, it could be something as simple as them starting a new bond as friends. But what I'm thinking is No Way Home teases that Ned has a touch of magic. He's capable of magic. He uses the sling to create portals, and sure, that could be a little throwaway thing, but I think it's a little bit more substantial. I think that could play a part here, where whatever that touch of magic he has could somehow allow him to have the capability of remembering Peter Parker. Now, you might ask why Doctor Strange doesn't remember then. And with that, I say the rules were kind of laid out as a preventative measure. Like, no one could cast a spell to make it where they won't not forget, or that as soon as the spell is cast, they will remember directly after. But there's no real clause about it in the spell to make it where they could never remember, or the capability of something triggering others to remember is completely impossible. We're not dealing with the Mephisto deal where all bets are off. We're dealing with a sort of loose spell that Doctor Strange casts. There's no reason to assume why Doctor Strange couldn't also remember at some point, if he were to cast a spell. It's just that he has no reason to cast a spell. Whereas Ned, put in a certain situation, possibly could. That's just a theory, though. It's a very loose one. Either way, I think the connection with Peter and Ned will be stronger, as, it's kind of more awkward for Peter to just randomly approach MJ and be like, hey, remember me, and let's start a new friendship. Either way. Going back to that synopsis, it also states that Peter is living alone now due to a lack of his relationships, his former relationships. And people really connect with this, as many love Peter Parker for the struggles he endures as a broke young adult who is down on his luck. You see it in a lot of the early Spider-Man comics. When people think of Spider-Man, that's what they're looking for and what they want to read. With this being set 4 years after No Way Home, that's not really changed. He's still wearing his simple cloth version of his suit with minimal to no tech. He's living in a small apartment. There's a scene where he looks pretty depressed washing his suit in a pretty crappy washing machine. So, I still think he's very down on his luck, and he's still mourning the loss of Aunt May. It also looks like he's probably attending ESU, or Empire State University, as we see him approach Bruce Banner. Now, that could just be a hoodie he threw on to try and get in to talk to Banner, but I think it's very likely he is attending ESU, much like he did in the comics. And that kind of segues nicely to talk about Peter being so down on his luck that he's actually going through a very tough time physically. He is changing, possibly mutating or evolving. There are clips where you see Peter is distraught and he's kind of emerging from a cocoon in the trailer, changing, not unlike how he does in the comics, in a little storyline called The Other. Now, this story, The Other, takes place across multiple Spider-Man titles, so it's a big sort of crossover thing. To kind of get into that, the storyline, The Other, has Peter dealing with a new issue where he is changing. He finds out he's actually dying, and it's kind of like a cancer almost due to his spider radiation. He goes to a lot of experts in the Marvel Universe, such as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four. They track down the Hulk and speak to Banner, who's an expert on gamma radiation, obviously. Then they make their way over to Black Panther, who all of which none of them know really how to help Peter. So he kind of gives up on science and he goes to Doctor Strange in an attempt to understand what is happening to him and save his own life. Doctor Strange tells him to make peace with dying, that he's lived a good life and there's nothing that they can do. So in the end, nothing works. And Peter goes up against Morlun and ends up in the hospital, and then strangely goes savage or feral fighting Morlun, and then he dies. He passes away. Everyone starts to mourn him, MJ especially. But then in the morgue, it's very strange, he's reborn. He flees from the scene and goes into a cocoon state, sort of a metamorphosis. And this is a very similar case in the trailer. Peter's losing his touch, as Frank says in the trailer, likely losing his powers akin to Spider-Man 2, and he's kind of weakened. We don't know if he's going to be dying like he does in the story, but he's definitely altered. He's not on top of his game. And there's even a shot in the trailer of Peter's eyes, and they're changing. They're resembling that of a spider. They go completely black with little red dots. And this is probably hinting at him going feral like he does in the comics. Maybe he'll even mutate to grow extra arms, also like the comics and the 90s cartoon. As I stated before, though, Peter goes to Bruce Banner to try to understand what is happening to him in this trailer, and that's exactly what he does in the other, so I think that's what they're doing. I think they're just kind of condensing that down because they don't want to have him go to Black Panther, and, you know, obviously the Fantastic Four isn't in this universe yet, and they probably also might have him go to Doctor Strange even. I think that's a possibility. I looked up the cast, and it says Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be in it, so who knows? Maybe they'll do that again, where he goes to Bruce Banner for a science reason. Bruce Banner can't help him, so then he goes to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange can't help him with the magic reason, so he's kind of left to fend for himself. When he emerges from that cocoon in the trailer, he is gaining new powers. You see he's got organic webbing, just like Toby did back in the day, and also there's this brief snippet where it looks like he is getting an increased spider sense, something much more like what he has in the comics versus in the original trilogy with Tom Holland. He's kind of got a lesser version of spider sense. You don't get to see it on display as much, but I think here we're going to get it much more akin to the way it is in comics. He's going to be a force to reckon with for sure. Banner comments on this process of metamorphosis in the trailer, stating that if Spider-Man's DNA is mutating, that's very dangerous. But there's also another voice that sounds very much like Keith David to me, who also comments on this process, stating that spiders have 3 life cycles. In between cycles, they are vulnerable, and that the spiders that make it through this process, they go through a kind of rebirth. Now, this voice could be nothing. It could just be like a random lecture, or it could be tied to a villain like Tombstone, maybe someone in The Hand, or maybe even an Osborn, kind of like the animated series shows. Banner is not the only person Spider-Man meets in this trailer, though. While Peter will likely meet the Hulk again and probably have some kind of small brawl or battle with him, we also see Frank play a large part in this film, Frank being Frank Castle, the Punisher. Frank is chasing after a tank in his van, and Spider-Man kind of kicks him out and tells him to get lost. And this could all be tied to The Hand still. As we see, they are very prominent and probably play a large part in this movie. But, you know, The Hand is mostly known as a Daredevil villain or antagonist or conflict. And so we'll probably see some crossover with Daredevil. And a lot of those threads culminate into a story called the Omega Effect in comics. And with the new seasons of Born Again on the way, we'll probably see some crossover there as well with Fisk's Vigilante Act and everything like that. So there's a lot of crossover happening here on the street level of things. Focusing on the tank, though, that Spider-Man is chasing down after he kind of subdues Punisher, is that he stops this tank somehow. They crash into a building, and when he lifts off the cover, an old lady is in the tank, just kind of innocently standing there. And there's this weird sort of effect that happens where it looks like something moves from her body to one of the soldiers, and from one of the soldier bodies to someone who's in like the rafters. Now, it seems like they're almost possessing these people. A lot of people think this may be Jean Grey, who is probably mind controlling these people. A lot of people think that's who Sadie Sink's character is going to be, and while that is possible, it doesn't fit perfectly, as Jean Grey doesn't jump bodies when she is telepathically connecting with people. But that doesn't mean that this isn't somehow related to the mutants. It could be another random mutant who has this ability and is, working with Jean Grey. Someone who just has the ability of jumping between bodies or like phasing into them and controlling them. Also, a fun note here on mutants, everyone thinks this brief snippet, this character here in the bus, is going to end up being Rogue, or maybe it's just a fun little tease. If they are doing mutant stuff, that Rogue will later show up. So there's that as well. Sadie Sink hasn't been confirmed as Jean Grey, though, so she could also be a character known as Rachel Cole, who's seen in the Punisher comics. Her first appearance actually being Punisher Volume 9, Number 1, who ends up being a very similar character to the Punisher and wanting similar things, vengeance and whatnot, who plays a part in that Omega Effect storyline where Spider-Man, Punisher, Daredevil all fight the Hand. What I think, though, my theory, is that this big bad is probably Mr. Negative. Now, usually Mr. Negative's abilities aren't, as body hopping either, so it doesn't fit perfectly like Jean Grey does either. But it doesn't mean that they aren't altering how certain things work. Mr. Negative's abilities are usually more visual, and he kind of inverts, the color schemes to look like a negative sort of picture when he controls someone, and he's able to just kind of let go of them when he's done with them. They act as more like possessed henchmen as opposed to like a ghost possessing. But who knows? They could just be playing with these things and changing them. This could even be edited specifically for the trailer to kind of throw people off, as Marvel has done in the past. It could also tie back into the Hand in some other way. Maybe this is some kind of dark magic or, ability that someone who's in their line of work can do, and it's part of their plot. There is a voice, though, belonging to Tremel Tillman, his character, and he states, "We are faced with a danger we cannot control, one we can't even see. People are drawing this connection back to Sadie Sink and Jean Grey, believing that they are talking about mutants." And this does track, as Tillman is playing a character known as William Metzger, who is a prominent anti-mutant activist in the comics. The parallel does also work when you consider that Spider-Man is mutating. Perhaps his research on himself ties in with whatever Jean Grey's mission is, because there's this clip here where it looks like Jean Grey is in an apartment that Peter was in earlier. So who knows? Maybe, it's a crossover like that. Peter did cross over with the X-Men in the 90s cartoon. He's crossed over with them in the comics plenty of times. So it's not going without saying that they could be tied together in this situation. Perhaps our introduction to the mutants, though, is through an operation that Jean Grey is somehow a part of that uses guerrilla warfare style of attacks against these anti-mutant operations. Maybe Jean Grey and a smaller band of X-Men, or even, I'm blanking on the mutant group that lives underground, but maybe they're trying to stop the early production of Sentinels, and that's what Tremel Tillman's character, William Metzger, is a part of. But like I said before, this could also still just be the Hand, as they largely operate from the shadows, or this could be a conversation that's completely out of context and meant to kind of throw us off. It could be a side plot for all we know. Could even be, setting up threads later for the X-Men and the mutants, and it's just kind of happening in the background of this Spider-Man movie. But with that being said, if it does end up being Jean Grey, I hope it doesn't detract from this being a Spider-Man film too much. Punisher, Hulk, Daredevil, Jean Grey, maybe even Doctor Strange, or other surprise cameos, it can get easy to be distracted from the core of this film, which is, it's a Spider-Man movie. It feels like Maybe the movie's even going to be too crowded. It's a worry of mine, if I'm being honest. A Spider-Man movie being crowded is a dangerous thing, as we've learned in the past. I'm looking at you, Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Those were always the largest complaints about those movies, is that there was too much going on, too many villains and everything. So I do hope that they do kind of focus in on this and it all ties together. If we have a mutant plot and a hand plot, I hope they somehow blend together nicely. Either way, kind of focusing on what's important here, there are lots of fun Spider-Man things going on. Firstly, the suit. When practical, it looks great. It's basically the same suit, if not the exact same as the final swing suit at the end of No Way Home. And so it's fun to see Spider-Man in some very familiar threads. Spider-Man's swinging, we didn't get enough Spider-Man swinging shots in the earlier film, so it's finally nice to see him having a good time swinging, especially on his home turf of New York City. Spider-Man went to a lot of unfamiliar places, and it was cool to see him out of his element, but it's been many years now, and I want to see Spider-Man in New York, so it's awesome that we're getting that back. Spider-Man's also gaining a lot of his abilities back that are way more in line with his comic counterpart, like I've mentioned, so I'm glad we're getting that as well. And what I'm super excited to talk about is that Spider-Man's facing villains that we've never seen before. It's fun. There are flashes of him fighting Boomerang, Tarantula, Tombstone is confirmed for the movie, and most prominently, we get to see some interaction with Scorpion. Now, most likely with Boomerang and Tarantula, my theory is that this is going to be like a little kind of gloss over, a very similar montage to the beginning of Fantastic Four First Steps, where they, go up against Mole Man and everyone. So it could be just one of those things where he's recapping the first 4 years since No Way Home, and he's gone up against all these fun villains and everything, but now we're kind of settling in. I also think the scenes of him getting the key to the city are going to be part of that 4-year recap. I don't think it's going to be anything prominent in the actual film. As far as him fighting Scorpion goes, that's way long overdue. I only have one thing to say about it, and it's that I hope we see more than just the exoskeleton that Matt Gargan has. I want to get a cool mask or like a helmet or something, but I'm honestly a sucker for the classics. You could give me that OG green look and I would love it. But even just something more akin to the PS4 game would be nice. I would settle for something like that. It just feels kind of bare bones in the trailer here, but the tail looks great, and I can't wait for Matt Gargan to be vicious here. Really be a villain, and I hope he is a larger part of the film. All in all, it is indeed a brand new day for Spider-Man in the MCU. It is starting to feel like Spider-Man is standing alone again, but is allowed to have some fun crossovers like we always imagined. I, remember being a kid back in the day and waiting for Tobey Maguire to meet Hugh Jackman Wolverine. So Spider-Man Wolverine crossover would have been awesome back in the day, but obviously because of rights and everything, that's hard to do. But, things are changing now, and it's shaping up to be a large homage to the early 2000s era of Spider-Man comics, which are home to some of my favorite stories, especially the entire run of J. Michael Straczynski's Spider-Man. I love that. Peter Parker as a teacher makes so much sense, and that series is full of emotion, so I highly recommend checking out that series, and I hope we get to see some adaptations of that maybe in the coming next 2 movies. I think this is supposed to be the first of another trilogy, and who knows, maybe next we'll see more Lun, or we'll get another adaptation of the symbiote. It'll be cool. Who knows? All I know is that as far as Spider-Man comics go, I hope Spider-Man editorial over at Marvel Comics would fix their current Spider-Man runs and fix all the issues that they got going on. But, that's something for another time. So I will see you all when I'm late to the next thing, and I appreciate you watching another video. Thank you so much.